Hey, it's Pastor Mike. This month on Behind the Series, we're going to tackle a series some of you have heard, but most of you haven't, called What is Love? I preached it a little bit ago. It's appeared on TV before, but we wanted to run it again because I'm not sure about you, but I always need that reminder of God's love for me and the love that He calls me to show to others. Now, you're going to notice there's no video on this episode. We actually recorded it when Amber and I were just doing audio before the video part came out. So I hope you enjoy listening. And one last thing. This month, we are super blessed to share a challenge grant of $130,000 that came from some incredibly generous donors. That means that when you give to Time of Grace, your gift is going to go twice as far to help us do twice as much and hopefully reach twice as many people with this simple message of God's amazing love for the world. And as a thank you for your gift, you can request a brand new resource called God's Grace for Your Daily Life. It's a planner that's going to help you get things organized in your life, but it's also going to be filled with reminders of God's love for you as you go through life. It's brand new, it's undated, so you can start whenever you want, and it's our thank you for your gift as we try to reach this challenge grant. Hope you enjoy this episode, and God bless. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Time of Grace's podcast, Behind the Series. It's me, Pastor Mike, lead speaker with Time of Grace, and I am blessed and honored and excited and enthused. And Amber, what's a really cool adjective I could put in to describe how I feel about this interview? It's really good.
You got me. You had so many there. I was thinking you were really on a roll.
I thought I was, and then I ran out after 4 adjectives. So I'm excited to be here with Amber L.B. Swenson. She's back on the podcast to help us talk about our really big, exciting sermon series that was a joy to preach at our church, and we're excited to share it with the Time of Grace audience too. So the series is called What is Love? Digging into the biblical idea of love, often used and often misused word in culture today. So God is love, and we're supposed to love each other. Christians are supposed to be known in the world by the way they love, and yet some people think Christians aren't loving, that they're hateful, that they're intolerant, that they're bigoted. So what does all that mean? We're going to try to unpack that in the series, and Amber's going to help us do it. So welcome back, Amber.
Yeah, thank you. Did you ever at any point think, boy, I've really bit off way more than I could chew when you do a series called What is Love?
Constantly.
Yeah.
And it's always like when you actually start to study the topic and then you're like, oh no, this should be an 11-week sermon series. How are we going to squeeze? The messages are long enough as they are. So yeah.
And when
you're
God
totally right.
is love, then how do you even start? So good for you to take it on. And I'm glad that you feel a little overwhelmed when you do it. So the first sermon that you did was called Show Tough or Tender Love. And you looked at 1 Corinthians 13. You examined which traits were tough and which were tender. Were you surprised to see that God's definition for love was considerably more tender than tough?
Oh, yeah. So if you're listening and you're not familiar, 1 Corinthians 13 is that famous love passage you sometimes hear at weddings. How love is patient, love is kind, it's not easily angered. So it's kind of a subjective call, but I divided it up. Well, patient feels like a more tender characteristic. If you're holding on to the truth, that's a little bit more tough. And when I kind of divided it into those two categories, God's definition of love in that passage was a lot of tender and just a little bit of tough. And I maybe would have been surprised, but some of the favorite research I've done in all my years of being a pastor, obviously if people are listening, they can't see me like you can on the Zoom here, but I'm pointing right now on my shelf to the stack of note cards that I have. Do you know about those?
I do. I remember.
Yeah. So
that's all the times that there's the God's, well, I'll let you explain it. You're much better at it, but yeah, so the positive things that God has said about you, his people and his word. Correct?
That's it. Yeah. So in the New Testament, I tracked every kind of tender thing God calls his children. You're my son, you're my daughter, you're loved, you're forgiven. And then all the tough ones. Oh, you of little faith, you're still a sinner. And there were 682 total examples, and 610 of them were positive. So for God's people who believe in Jesus, even though we struggle, and God could be, if he wanted to be a tough father in heaven, he could lecture us all day, every day. Instead, he is so tender with the way he speaks because of the work of Jesus. So maybe when I got to 1 Corinthians 13, it's not shocking that God, he's a gospel leaning God. He has a place for the law, but just like a good parent, he doesn't want to come down with the stick. He wants to show love and affection. And so imitating his love looks really similar to that.
So do you oscillate towards tough or tender
Ooh,
in your own life?
yeah. Yeah. You sent me that question ahead of time. My honest answer was both, because they can both be very convenient for me.
Uh,
So sometimes it's easy to be tough just because, like, well, here's the truth. If you don't believe it, that's on you. Boom, I'm done.
yeah.
So I don't need to be patient with you. I don't need to be quick to listen. I can just confront you. I can flip over tables like Jesus and just think I'm being loving. Kind of convenient for me. It doesn't take much time. And sometimes when I want to be liked, well, I'll just let my light shine and I won't bring up the tough subject right now. And I'll just be patient. These people need more time to hear the word. So I kind of thought, if I want to be lazy, I'll choose
Yeah.
tough. If I want to be liked, I'll choose tender. And so my sinful nature has a place for both of them. It's just a matter of choosing the right one at the right time from God's perspective.
Hmm. So how have you found, or have you found something helpful in the situations as a pastor or as a father or just in your community when you have to be tough? Have
Mm,
you found any, tips or,
yeah.
that's not your natural tendency. That's not our natural tendency.
Yeah.
So,
Mm. Yeah. Two things. And then I want to ask you the same question. I'm curious if you're more tough or tender. Um, when I started as a pastor back in 2007, I was assigned to a church in Madison, Wisconsin. And there was another pastor there named Glenn Schmiege, and he had been there for a couple decades, I think. And he had this great quote. Even though I haven't worked with him in about a decade, it still stuck with me. He always said, when you have to have a tough conversation as a pastor, his quote was, drip love.
mm,
Like, you're going to give someone the truth, but let them see it, like in your expression, let them hear it in the tone of your voice. Like, if you got to say you're walking away from God, like, let that choke you up. Like, if you just want to leave your wife and run away with some girl because it feels good right now, like, I'm not going to see you in heaven. So he had a way of teaching me of, say the tough thing, but say it in a tender way. So you don't have to shoot, you don't have to be a jerk about it. Jesus, Matthew 23, remember, he just goes off on the Pharisees. Woe to you, you vipers, you snakes, you whitewashed tombs. And then he weeps.
yeah.
Oh, I wanted to gather you like a hen would gather her chicks, but you didn't want it. So I always remember that from Glenn Schmiege, drip love. And real quickly, my second bit of advice is follow up.
Mm,
So, I can smash you in the face and you think, oh, that guy's a jerk and he hates me. But if I'm texting you the next day and say, hey, I know it was a really tough conversation. I've been thinking about it a lot and praying. How you doing? What have you been thinking about since we talked? And it just has a way of like, oh, he's not just trying to be a jerk and put me in my place and judge me. He actually cares about me. So those two things together, the follow up and drip love, are the best way that I know to approach it.
sounds like you had a really great experience with a pretty neat pastor to start
Oh,
your ministry, which is really, I mean, that
yeah.
can form the way you do ministry. I mean, that just is really important.
Oh, I can't imagine that. I mean, I did enough damage with my immaturity as a young pastor. Without him there to kind of balance me out, we're very different personality wise. Like, man, the church just needed him in so many ways. So I'm grateful for him. Yeah, how about you?
Yeah.
Do you lean towards at home with the kids, with your husband, at work, at church? Are you like the here's the truth? Amber's dropping bombs, quoting Habakkuk. It's just the word.
So let me ask you, because I can see you. Give me a T like technical foul if you think it's tough, or a cross if you think I'm tender. Which
Okay.
is your guess?
From listening to your podcasts, you strike me as like, I think you lean towards the tough side of things.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think in fact, when you said how much damage you did at the beginning of your ministry, I was a camp counselor for like 3 years, and I think I sent several kids to therapy. I mean, and I'm not joking.
Oh,
So they put me in the nature cabin to do a creative writing class, and I was doing camp stories. And of course, during one of our sessions, the mama mouse had babies. So all the kids, went by the glass of the aquarium and they're watching. Well, the next day, the camp caretaker comes in and starts feeding mice to the toad. Like they raise the mice to feed them to the snakes and the toads, right? Like he comes at the end of class. We're still talking and he's feeding. So one girl was just sobbing. She was going absolutely crazy. And I thought I was being helpful, saying, this is the circle of life out in nature. This happens all the time. Little birds get eaten by big birds. And then I was like, in fact, it's dinner time. Do you have any idea what we're eating tonight?
You did not.
I did. I did, Mike. I'm like, those hamburgers we're having? Do you have any idea what that was last year? I know. I didn't realize. I thought I was being, first of all, I'm in Wisconsin and I thought everybody in Wisconsin knew.
Yeah.
There are fields of cows. And so, I'm legendary for the amount of times that I probably did things to children that caused therapy. So definitely tough. Have a long ways to go. Have gotten better, but yeah, definitely tough.
Wow.
Unfortunately, because the series definitely showed how that is leaning the wrong way. So that's good. I have lots to learn.
Don't we all?
The second sermon was called "Isn't Jesus on My Side?" And I have to commend you because you went through the whole book of John. And that has to be, is that a record? For the amount of material covered in a sermon for you, or is
it was a quantity over quality message.
It was, but it's good. A whole lot of people just want to focus on Jesus being tender, but there's a danger to that. So what is the danger of just focusing on the part of Jesus teaching that we like?
Not to be drastic about it, but you could end up with zero Jesus. Those people who were just about the tenderness and, oh yeah, I'm a believer and I'm a follower. And he would tell those like chilling stories. On the last day, I'm going to say, I never knew you. Like you didn't do the will of my Father. I know who you are. Person's living in sin, deceiving themselves, saying, oh, I have faith, but they don't have works. Like just leaning towards the tenderness and love. He'll take care of it. It's fine. I don't have to repent. I don't have to change. I don't have to turn around on the sinful path that I'm on. So, you can think, oh yeah, Jesus died for me, the tender side, and totally miss out on repentance, which means you don't really have Christian faith. Or you could be so focused on the like, oh, you got to do what he says. And he has commandments and don't be ashamed of his words. And I'm following. But if I don't know the tenderness of the gospel, you can try to obey the commands of Jesus, but that won't save you. Like Galatians 3:10, all who rely on the works of the law are under a curse. So if you don't get both tough and tender Jesus, it's almost like you only get repentance, but no faith in the gospel, or only supposed faith in the gospel, but no repentance, which actually really isn't faith. So yeah, if you don't get the whole Jesus, you really don't get any of Jesus in the end.
And a lot of people, unfortunately, do this on purpose. I remember working with a girl who called herself a cafeteria Christian. She took what she wanted out of the Bible and put back what she didn't.
Oh,
You hadn't heard that before, huh?
I haven't.
Yeah, and it really was telling going through the book of John, because you pointed out over and over and over. Jesus was tender meeting with Nicodemus in the middle of the night and told him, rebuked him. You're Israel's leader and you don't know this stuff. He healed the cripple and then said, go and sin no more. He fed the people. And then he said, look, I'm the bread of life. And they all walked away from this hard teaching.
Yep.
It's there, but I think until somebody points it out,
Yeah.
we don't necessarily see it or recognize it.
Yeah. And that struck me because this is John's gospel and John is famous for the word love. So love each other, Jesus washing feet, God so loved the world. This is how we know what love has no one greater than to give up his life. And it really was eye-opening as I start I wonder if Jesus is tough and tender in every chapter, and 21 straight chapters he is.
Absolutely.
So you just can't avoid it. Yeah.
Mary anointing Jesus and pouring that out and him, commending her for it. And then Judas being
Mm.
like, hey, what are you doing? And
Yeah.
Jesus saying, hey, the poor are always going to be with you. So it was
Yep.
a really neat thing that I had never recognized before. And I think a lot of people will see it. It is very evident that
Yeah.
Jesus was both, not
Yeah.
one or the other. You have to have the grace and the truth.
Exactly. I'm doing a small group right now. We're actually reading through the Gospel of John, one chapter a week. And my group is super diverse. We have a person or two who's like not all in with Jesus. A couple, was it last night? Yeah, one of the guys said he's agnostic. Bunch of people newly baptized, bunch of us who are longtime Christians, and just we'll read a section of a chapter, and almost always after we get done reading, doesn't matter what chapter, what section, someone will go, "Oh." Like Jesus says something so fierce, you're like, "Oh, what's going to happen next?" Like, what would happen if you said that to someone? You're not Abraham's children, you're children of the devil. He says to the religious people. Oh, so just hearing people who've never read the Bible before just come face to face with the real Jesus and watching their reactions and hearing their reactions, you just can't avoid it. That's who he was.
So, Mike, here's a very telling thing. You oscillate towards tender. I know that because you chose the book of John for your small group study. I chose the book of Judges.
And then they all died.
Everyone went their own way. God sold them into slavery.
And Amber looks up from her Bible, looks everyone in the eye and says, "Don't." Snap Bible shut. Who wants to pray?
No one. We are all going home. Thanks, Amber. Great night. Great study. Way to go.
Pick up your 20% off therapy coupon out the door.
Amber is still sending people to therapy. Shocking.
Oh, man.
Okay, you made sure to note that in Jesus' day, a lot of people didn't agree with his teaching. In fact, he said to his disciples, if they hate you, don't worry, they hated me first. Are we doing a good enough job of standing apart as Christians and teaching our young people that to follow Jesus' teaching is really going to put them at odds with the rest of the world pretty much all the time?
Yeah, I don't know if that's clear. Like just pointing out sometimes we think, Christianity has this image problem because we're not loving and we're hypocrites. And there's certainly a big kernel of truth in that. But it should make you think that when love itself was walking on earth and he had 3 years to start a church, he got it up to 120 people. And that was because he raised some of those people from the dead. And they were dying, and he cured their sickness, and they were demon possessed. Like he did dozens of miracles, and he was perfectly loved. He balanced this perfectly, and he could not, he did not grow a big church. So I think for kids to just read the Gospel of John or the book of Acts or any of the Bible and realize, hey, it's never been a popular thing to not let people be God. That's the story of Judges, right? Everyone wants to do as they see fit. And in our day, people like the idea of God as long as he submits to their truth and their life. So I think it's good for kids to know, hey, this is hard. We all want to put ourselves first. And if you come with a message that God is love, but he gets to make the choices and set the standards, people will hate that. It will be intolerant and bigoted and judgmental and hateful, not because you're mean about it, but just because you're not letting them sit on the throne and wear the crown. So in my opinion, we should be with our kids, with our students, with the next generation. Let's just be honest. In the church that I walked into here in Appleton, the original pastor, before you left, it was a quote from Jesus from John 13. If the world hates you, it hated me first. See you next week.
It's true, though. I teach kids. I teach 7th and 8th graders this year, both Sunday school and Bible history. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, you're walking out of this class, you're getting confirmed. And when you get to college, if you're going to keep living this, you might be the only one on your dorm floor getting up on Sunday morning to go to church. You may be the only one who's not going to the party on Saturday night. I mean, it can be a very lonely thing. It's not necessarily persecution as much as it is, standing apart. And
Mm.
being different. And I think, we all want to fit in. I want to fit in. I
Yeah.
still want to fit in today. And so, and for teens and young adults too, I mean, they're no different. They also want to fit in, and to know that it can be very, very lonely, but man, if you get into a good campus ministry group and find those other people who are lonely on their dorm floors
Mm.
and get together with them and go to church together on Sunday morning, then there's two of you or there's
Yeah.
three of you.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Uh,
I think it's good to prepare kids, because otherwise you go with the expectation that, oh, I will not be the only one. Well, you very well may be the only one.
yeah. Yeah. Well said. It's better to be lonely with a clean conscience
Mm.
than in the crowd with a burdened one.
Oh, that's good. Very good. What about us in the church? I mean, I know your old pastor was preparing the people, but
Mm.
do you subscribe to, or do you read Voice of the Martyrs at all?
I'm familiar with it. I haven't read it probably in about a
Mhm.
year.
Okay. But it seems like in America we're not, I mean, well, how can we? We haven't lived it to the extent that they have in Sudan
Hmm.
or in Korea, North Korea. So we couldn't know that reading a Bible could mean death. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yep.
So, I mean, I think for us, it's hard to understand that in other places in the world, this is a very real thing. It is
Yeah.
life or death to follow Jesus. It is
Yep.
not it's your job,
Mm.
or it's your family.
Mm.
You're kicked out of your family
Yeah.
for not being the right religion, and you are homeless as
Mm.
a 13, 14, 15-year-old, beaten, so many things. So I think we've had it easy in
Hmm.
America for a really long time. So maybe we
Hmm.
don't understand
Yep.
that other people in other parts of the world experience this
Yeah.
in extreme ways.
Yeah. They're much more closer to what was happening to the apostles than we are.
Mhm.
We think someone says a nasty thing on a Time of Grace Facebook post and, oh, the persecution. It's
Right.
like, but I'm not afraid to walk into church and, film the next episode for Time of Grace. Like someone's going to walk in and assault me because I have a Bible in my hand. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
We need to toughen up a bit. I think we play the persecution card too quickly. And you just read, even in the Sermon on the Mount, very early on, Jesus says in Matthew 5, blessed are you when you're persecuted because of righteousness. Rejoice and be glad, because that's how they treated the prophets who were before you. So instead of like saying, oh, we got to do whatever to avoid persecution, like let's just do whatever to be faithful. And if we're persecuted or ignored or excluded because of it, let's be happy. Like, oh my goodness, I'm standing with Jesus. Maybe they're getting drunk, maybe they're ignoring the commandments, but they're not standing with Jesus. Here I am with the
Mhm.
Son of God. Like, this is pretty sweet. So rejoice and be
Yeah.
glad that you're living in the presence of God because you're being faithful to him.
Yeah, and you're in really good company. Wasn't it Peter and John who were arrested and they
Hmm.
rejoiced that they were persecuted
Yep.
for the sake of Christ?
Yeah.
So if you
Yeah.
are, you're in really good company.
Yeah. Amen.
The third sermon, what's my first love? And you talk about disordered loves. This was a really great sermon because so many things that go wrong. I mean, when we rub each other the wrong way, it's because you have your loves and your priorities in a different order than I might have.
Hmm.
And then Christians, you went through the catechism. So we had brought up the catechism the last time, and you brought up the first commandment, which is you shall have no other gods before me. And you mentioned how that should be the number one for Christians. So we might have a certain set of order to our loves, but then we're living in this world
Hmm.
that has a completely different order to things.
Yep.
I remember last time when you were explaining the catechism and you brought up the small and the large catechism.
Correct.
Luther wrote both, and you said the small catechism is like a question and answer, whereas the large catechism is essays. So we had our conversation on Wednesday. I went to teach that night, went a couple minutes early, went to check out my church library, which if you're not accustomed to your church library, they are awesome. That's where I get all my books. That's why I can't write in them. And I couldn't find it. So I went to my pastor's office and I said, hey, do we have a copy of the large catechism? And he came out and he pulled out this book that was like huge. And I said, no, 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 no. I'm not interested in that. It was the Book of Concord,
Okay. Yes.
which includes the Augsburg Confession, all these things that I'm saving for eternity. I will read those in eternity when I have more time. But so he pulls this out and he says, Luther's large catechism is like 75 pages in this book.
Yep.
I brought it home. We had it for devotions. We started the first commandment. It is phenomenal.
Yes.
As in, by the third night, I closed the book and I said, we're not reading this anymore because, Mike,
Uh-oh.
I bought my own copy so I could write in it.
Yeah.
I think he might be putting the 95 Theses on our church doors if Luther was
Ooh.
alive today.
Oh.
So the section, I mean, first, second, third commandments, right? First commandment, he is hard hitting. Like you don't find your security in anything else.
Mm.
And I'm just thinking, oh, Americans like our retirement accounts.
Mm.
We go to the grocery store and we have all the food that we need. We have pantries, we have freezers, we have, for Americans, I think this is kind of convicting. Second commandment, the use of God's name. There is never a time you should use God's name. I mean, look at all of our emojis and OM.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to the third commandment.
Oof.
Do you know what the purpose of holidays are for? The holidays are a time when we are to focus on God and his word and come together. Last Thanksgiving, well, let's just put it this way. Many, many people on Thanksgiving forget to go to church because they're so busy making food. And then they spend the rest of Thanksgiving looking at the brochures, what more to buy. So I think Luther may be a little bit, I mean, because it's not just the world. This Christians have become an awful lot like the world.
Yeah. You're onto something. Yeah. And I hope Amber's eye-opening revelation is an encouragement to just go on Amazon or online and get a copy of Luther's Large Catechism, because he really does unpack. You're talking about what it actually means to love God, right? Love God and love neighbor. We're talking about the 10 commandments. The first 3 are going to cover God. So what does it look like to love him more than the world, or trust in him more than my bank accounts, or find greater joy in gathering with his people than Good Friday shopping? That stuff isn't wrong. It's just a matter of the order of that love. So what am I most excited about? Where do I find my most comfort in? And those are the truly convicted. It isn't, do you believe in God? The demons believe that and shudder, the book of James says. The question is, what is God the first love? He's worthy of it. He made us his first love in pursuing our salvation. So yeah, Luther, he was very tender, and then he could be very, very tough. So
Very
he didn't water it
convicting.
down.
You know how in the Old Testament, I think it was King Joash who was king at age 7, I think. And then they found the book of the law.
Josiah. Yep.
Or was it Josiah?
I think
you.
so. Yeah.
I felt the same way reading this. Like I have found, I'm old.
Oh, you were close there. You were close. I don't know the answer to that question.
I'm old, and I have never, ever, and I'm searching for books on things like this, and I have never come across this. And I felt like, why is this not something that we are routinely doing for Bible studies? This is phenomenal, and this should be part of our normal. I mean, we bear the name Lutheran. I do.
Yeah. Well said. All right, man. There's no better pitch right now to pause this podcast and order this book that is rocking Amber's spiritual life.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. It went on a tangent.
Not at all. No, just like when you actually see like grace and truth without it being watered down, it smacks you right in the soul in convicting and comforting ways. I mean, just the raw law without, oh, it's okay, you got family coming over, or it's a busy season, the kids have sports, it's your only day off. Like we're just used to excuses for sinning against the law. And Luther's like, no, it's love God more. It's the first commandment on the list. Let me write a whole chapter so you understand what that means.
Amen.
And when you actually see it with eyes wide open, you're like, oh,
yeah, for sure.
Okay. Now I need Jesus a lot.
Yeah.
Then you come running to the cross.
Fourth sermon was called I'm Supposed to Love Those People. And I just kept thinking about the episode in Joshua chapter 5, where the commander of God's army comes and meets Joshua. And Joshua immediately says, are you for us or our enemies? And he said, neither. But as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. And we love to choose sides.
Mhm.
We want to say, well, God is on our side. The reason I believe this is because God is on our side, but God doesn't take the side of humans. God is
Mhm.
his own. We take his side, but not the other way around.
Mhm.
Why is this concept so important?
Oh man. So 7 years into marriage, my wife Kim and I needed some help. So we reached out to a counselor. And I was so hoping that this counselor would be tender with me and tough with Kim. Like, Doc, I've tried my best to communicate to Kim what she needs to change. Obviously, she needs someone with a professional degree. For you, let me just write this down, what you should say to her so she believes you. Yeah. So I think of that. God is what Jesus has called in Isaiah 9, a wonderful counselor. Wonderful counselors don't say, oh, it's all you and you're the problem. Like they stand on what's true and good and healthy. They call people to both pursue that together. And if they do, it'll turn out good and true and healthy. So that concept is huge for us. Because if Jesus would say it, you might see a plank or a speck in your brother's eye. But whoa. Like I'm on the side of truth, not on your side. Even if they're wrong, let's deal with you first. So if you think God is on your side and thank you, God, I'm not like those people, you end up a proud Pharisee who never repents, who's never humble, who never reconciles, and who never actually loves people, because you're always going to be tough because you think they need to change, and you're never going to be tender because they're the sinner and you're not. So thankfully, that was many years ago. I think I'm closer to like, oh yeah, I'm mostly the problem here.
I really want to interview Kim right now.
I'm just gonna.
He's at a
I'm
loss for words.
This really happens to me, but it is. Wow, Amber, it's always fun talking to you. I'm amazed at how fast the time goes. So, and if people are listening on double speed, it's even faster. So, yeah. Hey everyone, thanks so much for sticking with me and Amber. I hope you're having a great day, that you're growing in faith. I hope that you enjoy our sermon series called "What Is Love." Man, it's a challenge to love people, but God is worthy. And this series is going to help you realize how much God loved you first. So have a great day and God bless.